Hello and welcome to Foul Plays, where we look at tales of tabletop tragedy that are sure to ruffle some feathers. I'm your host, BossGoose, and in today's story, we have a DM who invites their best friend slash lover into a campaign not as a PC, but as a DMPC Cleric for the party, with promises that they're just here to help. It quickly becomes apparent this is not the case, as best friend begins receiving special treatment from the DM, complains whenever other players disagree or want to do anything other than what the cleric has decided, and accuses OP of singling them out and triggering their anxiety. Before we get to that though, it's time for the after party. After returning triumphant from our quest and regaling the patrons of the local taverns with tales of our adventure, you return to your room to find a mysterious note waiting for you. Looking it over, it appears to be an invitation to a private party at one of the local nobles' estates. It's late, but there's no date or time specified on the page. You need to decide whether to get a good night's sleep or head out into the darkness. So make your choice and we'll see what follows in 3, 2, 1. And if you decided to leave immediately, the streets are cold and dark and there's a bone-chilling wind blowing as you slowly make your way towards whatever mysteries await you at this party, and the looming mansion leaves you feeling uneasy. If, on the other hand, you decided to rest for the evening, then you grab your favorite subscribe button body pillow and have sweet dreams about all the updates you'll receive whenever new content is available on my channel, and all the existing videos that have kept you entertained for hours. Now, without any further delays, it's time to take your seats and wet your beaks as we dive on into today's tale. My spouse and I wanted to get into a campaign during COVID because of social isolation and all. We found a Curse of Strahd campaign that seemed like a good fit. Everyone brought on was a stranger to DM and to one another, except me and my spouse, obviously. We go through content warnings and such before we start the game. We discuss how to navigate towing boundaries, crossing boundaries, etc. Everyone's pretty cool with most things. Eventually, a few players have family or personal issues and have to drop, which is completely understandable, and we're introduced to another player pretty quickly. They play a bard, and they're an awesome fit to the party. Our party keeps kicking ass and taking names in Barovia, and learn about Madame Eva and the Taroka reading. DM was really excited about this session, and built up for over a week that a guest star was going to read our fortunes. Cute, fun, not weird at all. DM invited their best friend to play Madame Eva, and best friend did a great job. Then best friend asked if they could listen to the rest of the session. Still not weird. It's probably more fun to hear the party interact afterwards and react to your performance. I get that. DM asks right before the next session starts if best friend can tune in again this week. Getting a little weird, but whatever, no skin off my back. Suddenly, DM realizes that we don't have a cleric, and for some reason, we need a cleric. Not just a healer, because we have a bard, but a cleric. Next week, guess who shows up? Best friend, as our new cleric. We're promised that cleric is only going to be an NPC and effectively serve as a heal bot, especially since best friend has already played through Curse of Strahd and the rest of the party hasn't. DM starts sending me private messages about how cleric used to be DM's sub, and not a sandwich. DM also tells me that cleric still comes over and plays while DM is running games. Look, no kink shaming, but suddenly I start wondering how many times our party has been involved in something without our consent. I don't say anything though, because it's not my place to ask, and maybe I don't want to know the answer. A few times, best friend is drunk on the Discord and brags about being bratty, and makes comments about DM that make a few of us uncomfortable. It's also of note that DM has mentioned a fiancé that isn't best friend slash cleric. Again, not my place. There's an absolute real possibility that it's all consensual between the three of them. So, best friend RP's cleric as incredibly rude, overbearing, and mean, which is fine. It's just going to cause friction. I've been RPing my barbarian courtier as focused on diplomacy and treating everyone with courtesy until they attack. Clearly, there will be some headbutting. Bard, rogue, and sorcerer also seem to want to treat things diplomatically until push comes to shove. Oh, but not cleric. Cleric is this close to a murder hobo. You know, because of morals and convictions. Right. Morning Lord loves that murder life. Not to mention, Cleric starts metagaming and steering the story. Cleric throws tantrums every time the rest of the party doesn't do what they want. By this time, it's made the game a toxic environment because Cleric threatens to just storm off into the woods every time we suggest a different path forward, or waste our time with doing subplots. Subplots that everyone else in the party wants to do. Best Friend has been a bit of a problem player. Anyway, because of something Barbarian said to Strahd, along the lines of,
"Is it true what Barovia says about you? Or do you have a side of the story you'd like us to hear?"
Strahd, read that DM, forces Barbarian to choose who dies, Bard, Rogue, or Sorcerer. Read that again, Bard, Rogue, Sorcerer. Cleric is absolutely not mentioned. I asked DM to clarify, who exactly did Barbarian get to choose from again? DM leaves out Cleric again. I say,
"Choose me."
Strahd keeps attacking my 3 compatriots. Cleric shouts at me to just choose. I think, you're not on the menu. Sure, Strahd was probably going to kill one, or possibly all, if I didn't choose, but I was seriously hoping a self-sacrifice could have worked. Strahd decided to kill Rogue, my partner's character. So I RP some paranoia, because jokes have been made that Barbarian is a conspiracy theorist. Cleric must be in cahoots with Strahd because he didn't even mention them as a choice. Suddenly, DM says it was a mistake, and Cleric was supposed to be an option. Since it was DM's mistake, I don't get to RP any of this. Okay, that's weird. If Strahd said Cleric, I would have chosen Cleric. You know, the DMPC, obviously. So are we going to switch out Rogue for Cleric? I get a private message telling me to absolutely stop RPing the way I was, because I was hurting Best Friend's feelings. Best Friend has anxiety and you're making it worse. I very politely suggest that DM should retcon the cause but not the effect of the situation. DM tells me I'm being a problem and I should just let it go. Oh, but DM does suggest that Strahd could just have killed Barbarian instead. I also mentioned that we discussed content warnings and triggers before playing, but Best Friend wasn't a part of that conversation. It's a little unfair to say that I'm the problem for stepping over a boundary I didn't know existed. Finally, we come to an agreement that meant absolutely nothing changed, but I said Cleric. So Barbarian can't be paranoid, and Cleric isn't dead. Totally a fair trade on that one, I say sarcastically. Fast forward to last week's session. Cleric tells Sorcerer to shut up, and I say Barbarian doesn't put up with that. Best Friend stops me and tells me to quit RPing like that. Best Friend thinks that I, as a player, am singling them out to harass them, and it's hurting them personally as a player. I can see why it seems like Barbarian is singling Cleric out. Barbarian doesn't treat other characters in the party like that, because the other characters aren't so mean. Best Friend tells me that I, as a player, am taking away their ability to RP, because I RP Barbarian, reacting to Cleric being mean. It feels like the complaint is actually, I want to RP however I see fit and I don't want any consequences to it. DM immediately says, Best Friend has a point. I have already spoken with DM about Curse of Strahd maybe not being a good game for Best Friend if anxiety makes it hard to separate player from character. There have been other situations where Cleric has story-driving plots and backstories and NPC relationships that none of the PCs do. It feels like Best Friend saw us playing and demanded that DM insert them in our game. TLDR, DM inserted Best Friend/Lover into our game and is clearly getting special treatment. Update: after Best Friend ghosted the message I sent asking them how we can work things out, DM told us Best Friend decided to quit the game. Best Friend went to everyone else in the party explaining how I'm the villain and never mentioned that I asked how to move forward and RP with one another. Side note, I already told people the private message I sent, so they know Best Friend is full of... So what makes me curious here is if Best Friend wanted to join the campaign, why not just do so as a PC? I mean, overall I don't think it would have changed how things played out. I'm just wondering why the distinction. If I had to guess, maybe it was to justify the special treatment or so that DM could discuss meta knowledge with them? It's hard to say. Regardless, it's not a bad thing if DM wanted to invite a friend to the group. After all, they did lose a few players and that's how Bard joined the game. But since D&D is a group activity, he probably should have just discussed it with everyone first. I don't imagine they would have said no or anything, but it's good to be upfront. Instead, it was almost like they were trying to do that without actually saying they were doing that, which is just a little confusing for me. Now on to the actual horror elements of this story. The only subs I want to be talking about here are the ones on the channel. Seriously, you can do whatever you want with consenting adults in the privacy of your own home, but maybe don't start bragging about your sex life in DMs with essentially strangers, especially when it's implicating that stuff may have been happening when you're running your game. It's kinda sleazy, and no one needs to know what you're doing on the other side of that mic. Between that and everything else, DM is definitely the bigger issue in this story. Yeah, best friend was rude, immature, and apparently homicidal, but DM was the one enabling all this behavior. So, when you run a game, you may have a wide range of relationships with different people at that table. But when you start giving one of them special treatment over the others, that's going to kill the fun for everyone else. By immediately taking best friend's side anytime they had a complaint about someone, it shows the other players that they just don't really matter and they're only here to be along for the ride, which is not what D&D is all about. The incident with Strahd is a good example of this. Strahd is a jerk, and if you push his buttons, I would not put it past him to do something like this. But if that's going to be the case, it makes zero in-game sense for him to not include Cleric on that list as a potential victim. The fact that they weren't says to me and the other players that they're disposable and best friend is not. It makes perfect sense to me for OP's character to suspect Cleric after an event like this, because why wouldn't they? Having the DM immediately block OP's attempts to play this out, which maybe could have actually developed into something interesting, is ridiculous. The party doesn't all have to be friends, and heck, Barovia is even a perfect place to have a group of people who don't get along but have to work together. Stopping players from exploring this and even fleshing out their relationships with other characters is ludicrous. And just to be clear about something, I also have anxiety. A lot of people do. But just because you do doesn't mean you can go around acting like a jerk and then get mad at someone who doesn't like it and talks back. So to summarize, no RP because of best friend, no side quest because of best friend, and no player-driven plots or characters because they were all for best friend. Sounds super fun. If I was OP, I would not be sticking around in any games run by this DM. Anyways, thanks for checking out my video and sticking around till the end. I upload new content every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, so make sure you check out my channel for more D&D stories. And if you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave me a goosebump in the comments below. The support is appreciated. But until next time, be good players.